Something wild just happened in college football that almost nobody is talking about, because on the first day of the entire college football season, Ferris State went on the road to play against the number 4 ranked team in all of Division II, and they won. The score was 42-14. They dismantled Pittsburg State, and normally I wouldn't expect you to care that much about it, until I realized Pittsburg State was the last team to actually beat Ferris State in a football game, and that happened 2 years ago. Nobody has beaten them since, and they're now riding on a 31-game winning streak. That's the longest running streak in all of college football. And that is where this gets ridiculous, because Ferris State hasn't just been beating up on bad teams. They've essentially broken Division II football, and they're way more important to what's actually happening at every single level than anyone cares to admit. Now, what we just witnessed was the number 1 team in the nation, the defending national champions in Division II 2 years in a row, going on the road to open their season. It was team number 1 versus team number 4. That's as close as you're going to get to a marquee matchup if we're not talking about the FBS. Remember, the last loss they had was when Ferris State actually went on the road to Pittsburg State to open a season. So they know that this is one of the moments they could actually be taken down. And the game started off pretty close. It was scoreless through the first quarter. It was 7-7 midway through the second quarter, at which point Ferris State rips off 28 unanswered points. And yeah, from that point on, it was never really all that competitive. 520 total yards, over 350 rushing yards, and in Pittsburg State's case, they only had 44 rushing yards for the entire game. And remember, this is the exact same scenario, same stadium, same 2 teams, where the last loss occurred. So if you go all the way back to 2024, 19-3, that was the score when Pittsburg State took down the Bulldogs of Ferris State. You already know they haven't lost since, but you kinda don't understand just how wild it's actually been from that moment up until now. Most of their games you can probably assume are blowouts. And when we say blowout, allow me to give you a few bullet points. They beat American International 84-7, just a few games after that first loss. Just let that score sink in for a moment. But when they play against actually good teams, the type that are ranked down there in Division II, they normally win by at least 2 touchdowns. During that 2024 season, the closest they ever got to actually losing a game with a 3-point victory, 27-24, against Saginaw Valley State. But they also put 78 points on somebody else just 2 weeks later, so yeah, that happened. But what I neglected to mention is that 78-point beatdown, the score was 78-17. That was a Division II playoff game. This is what I mean by Ferris State has broken Division II. And keep in mind, this is while the streak was just getting started. They eventually won the national championship by scoring almost 50 points, holding their opponent to just 14. And during that entire season, Trinidad Chambliss was their quarterback. If that name sounds familiar, you should realize that he transferred to Ole Miss, competed in the SEC, won Newcomer of the Year, and more infamously kinda got into the news because he was petitioning for an additional year of eligibility. Simply put, Ferris State has very real players on their team. I'm sure they got great schemes. I'm sure they have great coaching. But at the end of the day, it's not just about the X's and the O's. It's also about the Jimmies and the Joes. They've been handling that part in Division II, which is why many teams are pulling up to play them, knowing good and well they're just hoping to get on the board. Forget about winning, because they know what time it is. But if you're new here, I want to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. My name is Rob, and if you really want an unfiltered perspective on college football, the type that actually helps you to see it clearly, then you are in the right place. And if anything that I say actually connects with you, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. But if I don't, just let me know in the comment section, because I try to read them all. When they opened the 2025 season, remember, no Trinidad Chambliss. They took down Pittsburg State again. The game was relatively close, 34-17. I'd call it close. It feels like a real football game. And then a few weeks later, they pitched a 76-0 shutout to Rio Grande. That was actually one of 3 shutouts in a row that they put on, where the worst of which, or I guess the best of which, was when they only won by 59 points. So 76, 66, 59, doesn't really matter. They are not just winning, they are beating down all of their opponents. they're still labeled Division II. And there's a good conversation to ask about why they're even still at that level. Trust me, we'll get to that point in a moment. And they even had 2 close games in conference. Because remember, they play against essentially the highest level of competition that they have down there in Division II. But structurally speaking, the games start getting a whole lot easier once they get into the beginning half of the playoffs. I mean, they'll play a D2 second round playoff game, and they might still win 60 plus to like 14. This is the Ferris State experience. So they run the table all the way through 2025, win another national title, which brings us to where we're standing now in 2026. Now that they have taken down Pittsburg State again, this time on the road, and Pitt State was supposed to be one of the biggest challenges they'll have this entire season. If you're just going off of preseason polls, that's the best team they were supposed to play. Now what? Is anybody actually going to beat this team between now and the end of the year? I mean, maybe it'll be the usual suspects if you're paying attention to the schedules, Saginaw Valley State, Grand Valley State, somebody like that. But let's just assume that the people who did the polls actually have it right. They already have the longest running streak in college football. So how many wins could they actually rack up? They've already won 4 of the last 5 Division II national championships. And when you're looking forward, it doesn't feel like anybody's supposed to beat them this year. When it comes to the D2 versus FCS level, there's a lot to say about the overlap between the two. At the bottom part of FCS are programs that could easily swap out with D2 and nobody would miss them. But Ferris State isn't that. If they came to the FCS right now, I'm pretty sure they believe they could compete for national championships. It's not that wild. Remember, Trinidad Chambliss leaves them, goes over to the SEC, wins Newcomer of the Year. And Ferris State didn't miss a beat. They kept on winning, perhaps even winning at a higher clip, because at least when Trinidad Chambliss was on the team, they technically took a loss that year. Granted, he didn't start that game, but the facts are the facts. So this is one of those moments where the college football world gets a whole lot more interesting if you actually care to pay attention. Ferris State likely is going to have a whole bunch of beatdowns that they're going to hand out between now and the end of the season. But there will be a few teams that really believe they could be the ones to break the streak. The streak itself now becomes the biggest opponent. It's not just whoever they're actually facing up with, because the players know they're racking up the wins on the way to chasing history. And at some point, Ferris State is going to have to vacate their seat in Division II. You can't just keep going like this. This might last for a few more years potentially, but the way conference realignment has been going, even North Dakota State, whom nobody thought was actually going to leave the FCS, eventually did it because it just made sense. They had won too much and gotten to a place where they actually had fallen off a little bit. They were no longer the perennial powerhouse that they once were. Still nationally competitive. They just weren't winning everything. And considering from that moment, like if you're a Ferris State, you're likely never going to have a run that is anywhere near as good as this one. The only thing you can actually do to raise the stakes is quite literally go up to the next level. Because right about now, they are a Division I program disguising themselves in Division II. Everybody whom they're playing against already knows it. I'm not really interested anymore in whether or not Ferris State is good. We already know that part. I just want to find out who actually has what it takes to beat them, and when and where is it actually going to happen? Because I'm going to be paying attention from this point on. If you actually made it all the way to the end of this video, I do have to admit that thank you doesn't do it justice anymore because you are a real one. If you have any reaction at all to something that I said, I do invite you to sound off in the comments. I don't always get to respond to everything, but I do the absolute best that I can to read them all. If nothing else, and you really just want to see more content like this, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.